Hello, I'm Jacob, and this is my presentation on the Crimean War. So the Crimean War was fought from 1853 to 1856, and it's been considered by some to be one of, if not the first modern war. Some dispute and say it's the American Civil War, which was fought a few years later. But the Crimean War was fought only initially by the Ottoman Empire and Russia, but later France, Britain, and the Kingdom of Sardinia joined on the side of the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire first declared war against Russia in October of 1853. One reason for the war breaking out was Russia had constantly demanded and tried to coerce the Ottoman Empire into giving it control over the Orthodox citizens of the Ottoman Empire and the Christian holy sites that are in modern-day Jerusalem and Palestine. And not only did the Ottoman Empire see this as a threat to its own sovereignty, but France also saw it as a threat against Catholicism, as if Russian had control over the holy sites, then they wouldn't allow access. They feared that they wouldn't allow access to Catholics. The Ottoman Empire had previously worked out an agreement with France for equal Catholic and Orthodox control of the holy sites, but Russia disagreed and wanted a majority Orthodox control over the sites. So for a little background, Crimea is mainly where the war was fought, and it's a peninsula in the northern portion of the Black Sea. It was kind of on the border between the Ottoman Empire and Russia, and they have had territorial disputes about Crimea, along with a lot of other territories along their border for a while, and this only heightened tensions and led to the war. Initially, Britain and France had tried to start diplomatic efforts to try and prevent the war, as they thought it would be unnecessary, but they were not successful. And in the first few months of the war, before Britain and France joined, the Ottoman Empire struggled against the Russian naval forces, with an Ottoman fleet being destroyed by the Russian naval forces. And Britain soon realized that potential power shift in Europe that would happen if the Ottomans were to lose. Britain would no longer have any influence over the Black Sea, which they didn't want. So this prompted them to join the war on the 27th of March in 1853. France also had a stake in the war, not only because of them trying to secure their Catholic interests in the area, but also they saw it as an opportunity to sort of reassert themselves as one of the major power players in Europe. Similarly, the Italian Kingdom of Sardinia had joined the war in 1855 on the side of the Allied forces, as they hoped that victory would help them in their efforts to help unify the fragmented Italy. They hoped to develop diplomatic relations with France and Britain to try and sort of legitimize their cause. And also, the Austrian Empire had given some support to the Russian side. So they also hoped that with the Russians losing, that Austria would also be harmed by this, which would allow them to try and further unify Italy. So the naval portion of the war was mainly fought in the Black Sea, though there were some minor campaigns, mainly led by Britain in the Baltic, Pacific, and White Seas. And Britain also had set up naval blockades in the Baltic Sea to block any trade going into Russia, and as a means of trying to financially cripple them so they couldn't fund the war. And most battles took place on the Crimean Peninsula, and the main focus of the Allied forces was to capture the Crimean city of Sevastopol, which was a major naval base for the Russian forces. And the Allies started their attempts at capturing Sevastopol in the mid-September of 1854, and initially expected a quick victory, but the planned one-month raid turned into a year-long siege after their first failed attempt. So for the other battles, one of the first battles after Britain and France had joined was the battle at the Alma River on September 20th, 1854, which was an Allied victory. This battle happened before the siege of Sevastopol. And during the siege of Sevastopol, Russia had attempted to divert the attention of the Allied forces, which resulted in the Battle of Balaclava, which took place on October 25th, 1854, and the Battle of Inkerman, which took place on November 5th, 1854. And both these failed as Russian forces were no match for the Allies. And a particularly well-known engagement that took place at the Battle of Balaclava was the charge of the Light Brigade. This engagement is known because it was a major military miscommunication, is often seen as a disaster, though it was effective as the British forces, about the numbers vary, but of about 660 cavalrymen were able to drive off a strong Russian force that was several times their size, but they did not win without heavy casualties. Um, this became a demoralizing defeat for the Russians, though, as they never engaged the British cavalry again. Here you can see a map of the principal battle sites during the Crimean War. These are the ones that were in the Black Sea. On the left portion of the map, you can see where Crimea is in the Black Sea. You can also see, shown by the red line on the left, the Ottoman and Russian border. And on the right, you can see the locations of the battles. You can see the battle at the Alma River. You can see where Battle of Inkerman, Balaclava, and Sevastopol are. So with Sevastopol, initially the Allied forces tried to rush the Russian forces in Sevastopol on October 17th, 1854, but were beat back and realized they had to change their strategy. So this was the initial attack that led to the year-long siege. And the siege lasted until early September in 1955. And at this point, the Russian forces had been drained so heavily by the siege and the other battles that they had eventually decided to abandon the city and destroy all the remaining ships. The war had nearly bankrupted Russia, and France had grown tired of the war and were satisfied with the capture of Sevastopol. The two began peace negotiations in the fall of 1855, and these lasted till the spring of 1856. And the other countries were weary of the war, but Britain was not, and decided to try and continue the war and built up their forces in the Baltic Sea outside of Kronstadt, which was the fortress that protects St. Petersburg. And these constant threats Britain made towards Russia caused France to leave them out of peace negotiations, as they thought they would harm them. And eventually a treaty called the Peace of Paris was signed in March 1856, which officially ended the war. The Crimean War is remembered as one of the most mismanaged wars in history, and some even claiming it never should have started in the first place. And the war was particularly bloody because a lot of the countries, particularly Britain, had developed a lot of new modern military technologies, but they didn't have the developed communications technology to back it up. And this led to poor communication on the battlefield and miscommunications, as seen with the charge of the Light Brigade. The war is also notable because it was one of the first to be heavily photographed, photography being still very new at the time, and this allowed the horrors of the battlefield to be brought home back into Britain and France. And one of the most prominent photographers of the war was Roger Fenton, a British photographer who was commissioned to take pictures of the war. And on the right here is one of his photographs of a encampment. An effective war is that with all these new industrial technologies coming about, nations soon realized that war can no longer be fought like it once was, and so this led to advancements in communication technologies and medicine. The miscommunications of the war were immortalized in the poem "The Charge of the Light Brigade" by British poet Alfred Tennyson. Similarly, the need for advancement of battlefield medicine was immortalized in the accounts and efforts made by nurses Florence Nightingale and Mary Seacole. So in conclusion, the Crimean War had not been particularly remembered for its causes or effects politically, but rather it was remembered for displaying to the countries involved and to the world that wars cannot be fought effectively by using advanced military technology without the advanced communications and technology to be able to effectively support it, or other modern infrastructure. And so that's the end of my presentation. Here are my sources, and thank you for watching.